35th, and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic,
one nation, under indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, is there any public comment? Doesn't seem like there is. Online, we have Chair McEwen, and just to introduce myself, I am Chris Dickinson. I'm the Vice Chair of this committee, Infrastructure Committee. And so what I'm going to do right here, just at this part of it, I'll be chairing this meeting because Chair McEwen is in Arizona. And so he asked that I go ahead and run the meeting in his stay. So what I'd like to do, though, without objection, is just take a few moments to introduce ourselves so we kind of get a little bit of information on each other. We'll start with the supervisors and then move to our department heads, commissioners, and such. So I'm Chris Dickinson. I'm in District 29, representing 5 municipalities in the Stratford area in the southwest part of the county. Second term on the county board and the second term on this committee. Also serve on the airport board, and we'll be serving, thank you, Brian, for that. Also serving this term as well. And pretty much that's about it. I work in IT, I'm married with children, and now have a 6-month-old border collie, which life is more fun with her. So I would pass it on to Tom.
Tom Saber, area 27, that's the southwest. Walmart, Menards, that's all in my district. Goes up to Marshfield.
Joel Straub. Mike, please. Cool.
Joel Straub, District 15, Wards 6 through 10. That's in Cronenwedder. I represent the southeastern part, basically, of Cronenwedder. I'm also a village trustee for Cronenwedder. I've just been appointed the chairperson of the Community Life, Infrastructure, and Public Properties Committee. And I'm married, 2 children, grown children. I'm a grandfather now with 2 grandsons and another grandchild on its way. And that's about it.
Gary Gisselman, District 5, centered on Athletic Park up on the northeast side of the city of Wausau, also on the Wausau City Council, retired, a variety of other things keeping me busy.
Jasper Hardinger, District 22, which is parts of Weston, east toward Ringel. First term supervisor, also sit on the board for Village of Weston. 2 kids, pretty active in the last year, year and a half, I guess. Own a construction business, so doing residential and commercial contracting work. That's about it.
John Robinson, I represent District 4, which is on the other side of the tracks, due east of here. The good side of the tracks. And this is my 3rd term on this committee, and I've been on the board since 2006, and I have 3 kids and 5 grandkids. I'm retired from the DNR.
I'd pass it to Craig McEwen.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Craig McEwen. I represent District 18, which is 2 wards in the Village of Rothschilds and 1 ward in the Village of Weston. Been on the board for starting my 15th year. I'm also on the village board for the Village of Rothschilds. Married, have 2 grown children, 1 grandchild, and things are looking very well as far as the weather down here in Arizona, but unfortunately I was down here for a funeral, but the weather's still very good. It's in the 90s already. So, but I just want to welcome the new Infrastructure Committee and looking forward to working with you. Thank you.
You want me to go? Sure. No,
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Jerry.
I'm Jerry Klein. I'm the director of the City County IT Commission, and you're going to hear more about that later on in the agenda. But I will tell you a couple quick things about me. I've been doing that for 15 years, and I'm also an elected supervisor of the town of Rib Mountain, and I've been on the Granite Peak Ski Patrol for 17 years. 2 grown kids.
Jim Griesbach, Highway Commissioner. I've been with the county for 32 years, half of those being commissioner, 2 grown kids, and I found out for 2 days ago I'm going to be a grandpa because my daughter is getting a dog.
Oh, there you go. That's even better.
We're starting out small.
Does it look like you?
Good morning, Kevin Lang. I'm the engineer for the highway department working underneath Jim. Been doing that for about 15 years now. Before that, I had about 10 years with a Becker Hoppy local consulting firm doing airport work, where I actually got to work at Seaway before Brian was there for a little while. From the area originally, I've got a couple kids. One's down at Platteville, the other is a sophomore in high school, and I don't know, been involved with Boy Scouts and coaching with the kids, and then work, and that pretty much keeps me busy all the time.
Good morning. I'm Brian Griefe. I'm the airport director at Central Wisconsin Airport. I've been there for just over 6 years now. Live in Rib Mountain with my wife and 2 kids, and I think those are my highlights.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dave Mack. I'm the planning manager for the Conservation Planning and Zoning Department. Been with the county for just about 27 years now, and mostly doing transportation planning for the county in that capacity. And married 2 grown kids. That's probably about it. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. Kim Trueblood, Marathon County Clerk. Been with the county off and on since 2011, full-time since 2018. So.
Lance Leonard, County Administrator. Been in that role since January of 2020. Been in administration for several years prior to that. But background, lawyer by trade. I sat far enough away that you guys couldn't throw anything. Worked in the DA's office in this courthouse for about 8 years. I was the felony drug prosecutor for most of that time, and then I was one of the county's lawyers in Corporation Counsel. Personally, married, wife, 2 kids, live in the Wausau area. Been here for the last 16 years of transplant from the eastern part of the state. So good to meet everybody. Look forward to working with you over the course of the term.
All right, well, thank you, everybody, for that. We're going to move on here to item number 4, approval of the minutes of the April 7th, 2022 Infrastructure Committee meeting. Have a motion by Robinson. Second by Hardinger. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5, policy issues, discussion, and potential committee determination. There is none. And moving on to item 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. Item A is the Town of Emmett request for financial aid for access to Big O Plain Park Road.
The town of Emmett is requesting financial aid for a road going into the Big O Plain Park. This is a policy that the county's had for as long as I can remember. It was updated with the resolution 4615 in 2015 to help with the cost of roads going into the park. So what it means is we have numerous parks around Marathon County. We did this probably in 2015 going into Mission Lake. This is going into the Big O Plain Park, where they have a road that's in the town's name that goes into a county park, and most of the traffic generated on those roads are caused for people going into the county parks. So therefore, we help with the cost of maintenance on those roads. They plow the roads and they do all that. This is more when they do a major improvement. So right now, the town of Emmett is looking at putting asphalt on that road in 2023, repaving that road. So what we do is we go out there, we do some traffic counts to figure out what percent of traffic is actually using that road to go into the Big Old Plain Park in this instance, and what amount of that traffic is locally generated. So after that, we'll come up with a formula and say, we'll pay, for example, after we do the traffic counts, probably in this case, probably about 75% of the cost for those improvements, seeing the county parks are generating the traffic that's going on that road. The town of Emmett actually wants to do the job right, so they're asking for a little something different. The resolution says you need to have your request in by August 1st, so they're submitting it already. But what they want to do is they want to do some of the work already this year. They want to put in the culverts this year, so they settle out, so they're not ripping the road up, putting the culverts in, and then paving right on top of them, have them settle out. So they would like to do the work this year. So the only thing their ask is if they put in the culverts this year, okay, they'd like to be reimbursed for them. They know they won't be reimbursed in 2022 because it was not part of the budget. It'd be reimbursed in 23, but they're asking if they could be reimbursed early on in the beginning of the year for the culvert cost, and then they would just be reimbursed later on in the year after final inspection of the paving is done. So, that cost will first probably be reimbursed in 23. So they have a couple requests. The first request is the reimbursement as Resolution 4615 says they're entitled to, and then they're also asking if they could do some of the work already this year with them knowing that they won't be reimbursed this year. It'll be part of the reimbursement in 2023. So their projected cost for the project is $395,254. Again, we won't know what percentage that is counties. They did do a different portion of the road, the north-south portion of that road, which Tom's more familiar with, coming off of 153. I'm guessing the traffic counts are going to be at least that much, and at that point, 75% of the traffic going into that park road was generated from park traffic.
So which part of that road?
This is the
part off of 153 is done?
That part is done. This
Up to
is
the stop sign?
Yep, and so this is when you hit that stop sign that you're referring to on Moon Road and Big Old Plain Road, when you go back to the west into the park. So this is the road.
Where does the park road start?
The park road starts right in the entrance of the Big Old Plain Park. That whole road going down to that park.
Past the curve?
Right when the curve starts, that's the beginning of the park.
So they only got from the stop sign to the curve.
Yep, I don't know if they have the distance in here. It's about a mile.
Okay. How much, I don't know if you know this, but how much income is generated from the park and from the boat landing? I know back when that boat landing money was put in, that was for road maintenance and all that kind of stuff, and
That money that for the boat landing is for road maintenance within the park. The park commission is actually doing work in the park this year. We're probably going to be doing that. So that money generated is, my understanding, that money generated is for roads within the park, not the roads that are leading.
okay, that leading up to the park.
Additional questions?
Is that 300 and some thousand, that's not in stone? I mean, that could go up $100 grand, huh?
That could go up, but I actually helped the town of Emmett with his pricing, and I did use a pretty inflated price already for that roadway cost.
Supervisor Robinson?
So in terms of general transportation aid and/or road aid, how would this factor into our cost? One of the concerns that I have, quite honestly, is that cities are less than 20 cents on the dollars reimbursed for roads. This road would be needed with or without the park. Now, there's added volume with the park, but they receive money through the payments from the state. Can we use our cost for that road in our general transportation aid budget?
That's a good question. I don't know if we would want to use our costs that we generate, that we get from the levy. I believe last time, if I can remember all the way to 2015, that we just levied that the amount of money. We did not use any of our transportation aids.
Well, but I'm looking at for a 6-year average.
Oh, does it go on to our 6-year average?
Yes.
I do not believe it does, no.
Is there a way, if we're making the investment, is there a way for us to look at trying to recapture those costs?
I believe, again, I'd have to do a little more digging into it, but I believe the only way you're going to recoup that cost is if we want to take over that road. Believe me, we don't want to take over that road.
So from a jurisdictional perspective, they have to be. So so this is out of cycle with the bridge and culvert aid.
Correct.
So we would levy for that and spread that. Would the county portion of the culvert be part of that bridge and culvert levy?
No, this is a different, it's not as, because that levy that for the culvert and bridges, that's split apart. Every municipality that's in it, the town of Day, they help pay for that. This is strictly county assistance. It does not get into that other bucket of money of culvert and bridge aid. Culvert and bridge aid is split up between every municipality that participates in it. This is a separate line item.
Supervisor Hardinger?
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay. So, yeah, just to tag on to what Mr. Robinson asked, so how are we paying for it then? If it's not part of that levy, like it's...
If it would not be part of that, what he's talking, it would just be Marathon County tax levy.
Okay, so what, is that coming out of an operational budget or?
Yeah, it comes into our operational budget, and then we just pave the road and comes into our budget under operations, and then we pave the road.
Okay. Thank you.
Jim, who regulates the camping fees? And where does any of that money come back to the county for roads, for snow plowing, for stuff like that?
I'll defer that one to Lance, but I believe all the money generated within the park stays within the park system and stays in Jamie's budget.
That is correct. Okay, so that wouldn't be our part to look at the fees, because I think their nightly fee is $26, and you don't do anything for $26 in this day and age.
So if I can ask a question then, so the resolution 4615, this is something with the town of Emmett we normally would do, provide assistance.
Correct. We've done that in the past. The last time I did one was, like I said, was in 2015. We massaged the resolution a little bit. I remember there was some wording that we wanted changed. But in 2015, we did the same thing for the town of Reed, Mission Lake going down in the southeast part of the county. We did the same thing down there. We've already done it with a different road into Marathon Park. There's a list of parks that actually are county parks that the county roads come into. Kevin had found something and Jamie had put together, but Big Old Plain Park and Mission Lake are the ones that pop into my head, that they're bigger county parks that people use town roads to get to. So again, I believe what we're going to see when we do the traffic counts on this, at least 75% of the traffic on Big Old Plain Park Road is generated from vehicles going into the park.
So we're talking about a 75-25 split then?
Correct.
75 our end, 25 their end?
Yes. Again, we'll have to do the traffic counts, but that's what I'm guessing it's about there.
Supervisor Gisselman.
So we're committing this to the 2023 budget, and has this been done before? I mean, this is sort of an automatic into the 2023 budget. I'm not familiar. Is this pretty much standard procedure that we're committing this into that budget?
Again, we don't have that many cases this happened. The last time this happened was 7 years ago. So at that point, yes, we take the money out of the budget. Our money's put into our budget for improvements on this road. So it hasn't been controversy to this point.
So the county board is pretty much okay with this sort of a commitment at this point in time, early on into the 2023 budget. That's, I guess I'm not familiar with that kind of a thing, committing ourselves to at what point in time this is the 23 budget, but so be it then.
With respect to your question, Supervisor Gisselman, certainly if this is approved, I would build it into the 2023 budget. And as Jim said, essentially this is coming out of the operating budget within the Highway Department. Just like any other, paving project that we would have to have funding within the budget to allow us to proceed with during the calendar year, we would build in this funding to carry out the project based on the direction from this committee and ultimately the direction from the board, because this would have to go to the full board. Do you want to?
I believe, now I look at the,
So I was able to pull up Resolution 4615, so you can see this is the resolution that Jim referenced, the Marathon County's assistance for improvements and maintenance to access roads to county parks and forest units, So this is the policy action by the board and taken in previous years relative to that partnership with local units of government. You'll see that in the second whereas, wherein we have historically engaged in that cost sharing that Jim's referenced.
looking at the list of roads, the ones that pop up that I know we've done Bluegill Bay Park Road, we did that some time ago also. Again, Mission Lake we've done one into Big Oak Plain Park, because they have two different roads that come into there. So we've already done and helped them there. And I believe Sunnyvale, we've also helped with that cost already too. So we've had history over the years doing this.
Additional questions? Supervisor Hardinger.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to wrap my head around how much of our operational budget this would take as far as a percentage and what it would take away from other projects. I understand that we have a precedent of doing these things, but without, I know you probably don't have the 23 budget put together yet, but just trying to get an idea what percentage we usually allocate to this without having to increase the levy.
I wouldn't have those numbers in front of me unless Lance could. Our paving budget's about $6.8 million, so if it goes into that, you're looking at 75% of 395, maybe.
So historically speaking, these types of projects that we've had carry some percentage in our budget?
We've done them both. We've put additional money into our budget. Traditionally, that's what's had happened when we put additional money into our budget. So we're not losing any miles of our county paving system.
Yeah, that's essentially what I was trying to ask.
Yeah, we're not losing any.
Okay.
This will be additional funds put into the budget.
Thank you.
And if I could just add, you will see in the 2023 budget when there is the capital portion of the budget, you'll see within not only my narrative, but also the capital chart at the end, the specific roadway paving projects that Jim and the rest of the highway department are going to carry out in 2023. You'd also see a line item or a reference for sure within my narrative to this project. And it's always the prerogative of the board whether or not to fund any of those specific projects. We will build the budget based on the direction we receive from the county board and the individual committees, but at the end of the day, that's the board's budget that will determine the levy. The other piece with respect to this project in terms of moving forward, we are operating off of the past resolution in terms of the direction of the board. It is always the prerogative of the board to change that. If the board doesn't want us to have that partnership, that form of partnership, because we still certainly partner with other local units of government, but if this isn't the type of partnership you'd envision, you certainly can, through policy, which is again the entire purview of the board, change that. But again, under 4615, Resolution 4615 from 2015 and past practice, we're operating off that. If you want to give different direction. Certainly you can do that. My only, the only thing I'll say with respect to that is I hesitate to look at roads specifically. It's more about the policy of how you want us to operate. It shouldn't be, hey, this township, we're doing this and this. It should be a general policy, because then again, staff can move forward with that direction. Otherwise, we're going to be in front of you with individual projects frequently. But thank you.
One sec, Supervisor Sober. I think I'm going to Supervisor Straub. That's okay.
Well, I just was wondering, because it says that the town of Emmett is requesting assistance. Is there a standardized form that townships and cities and municipalities use to make a request for funding assistance from the county?
It depends on the program, okay? Supervisor Robinson talked a little bit earlier about a culvert and bridge aid. We have a separate request for that. We send out an annual letter for that. So there's a form to fill out for that. If I'm doing a federal bridge program, then I'm following the federal guidelines and working with the townships on those. So I'll work with the township. Let's say they have a bridge that needs to be repaired. I'll just contact them and say, all right, you want to be part of this program or not? Because I oversee 350 bridges in Marathon County. 110 of those being on the county system, 240 are in municipalities. But by statute, we oversee the entire bridge program. So when a bridge comes up, I'll just contact and say, all right, I have some funding available. Would you like it? So it kind of depends on the program. This program in the past history has just been a letter of written request for most of these townships in these areas know that this assistance is out there. So they'll just come and do a letter request.
Okay, so someone from the municipality knows that request would be entertained.
Correct.
But it's not a standardized form where someone goes.
There's no standardized form for this particular.
And who do they approach send that letter? Who would receive that letter? Okay. Thank you.
Supervisor Sorbert.
Okay. Jim, do you think the Parks Department should have some skin in the game? It's the campers and the people using the parks.
That would be a policy question for the county board supervisors.
What kind of skin in the game, I guess?
That includes electricity. They're not, and other campgrounds are between 60 and 150.
With respect to that point on camping fees, we are working within the Parks Department to put together, very similar to an item later on your agenda, your transportation sustainability plan, working with the Parks Department to put together a park sustainability plan to have a better handle on our revenues and expenditures and what is the expectation with respect to park sustainability. Do you want to have a park system that is 100% self-sustaining in terms of its revenues and fees? Because there are implications to that. I mean, you certainly put individuals perhaps without, you can have some impact on access. Or is there a cost recovery methodology that you'd like to pursue? Again, those are policy questions for the board. We are going to bring together a plan to the board for the board to review and take action on. But to your point, the idea of what is the policy, what is your expectation as the board in terms of park fees and how they relate to the cost to operate parks. And moving beyond parks, if your expectation is that the park fees and revenues would also have some role in reimbursing these sort of activities, we can work toward that. I will say your parks are not self-sustaining. There is tax levy that goes into parks. So this, right now, it's all under levy. Whether you have it come out of the parks, the levy allocation to parks, or whether you have it come out of the levy allocation that goes to the highway department, this right now is levy-funded activity.
I just want to add one quick comment. If you look at the resolution, that, I mentioned that it's based on a percentage. We do realize that the town has some of the wear and tear on the road anyhow. So even if we would say 99% of that traffic is going into the park, you only take that times 0.75 because we do realize, and the towns do realize that there's a percentage of that. So let's say 50% of the traffic goes in there, you take that 50% times 0.75 and then times the cost. So it would never be the full percentage of the traffic going into the park because there is some wear and tear naturally is going to happen on the road that the town's responsible for.
Okay, so I guess where we are here, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the Town of Emmett's request for financial aid for access to the Big O Plain Park Road, which would include that reimbursement in early '23 and I guess in mid '23 or late '23, so that they can move forward with the culverts this year and the asphalting next year.
I would make that, but I would like to add on the percentage basis.
That's part of the resolution.
Okay. On that percentage basis, I would make that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion by Seubert,
Second by McEwen.
we're going to say second by Gisselman. Sorry, but the phone delay got you. Chair McEwen. Is there any further discussion on that?
Yeah.
Supervisor Hardinger.
Thank you. And this is probably a question for another meeting, but just to get a rough idea how much we do levy to maintain these parks versus what their internal revenues are would be something that I think I'd be interested in taking a look at.
Sure. I can send you that in the next 2 minutes.
Great.
It's in the budget message, the revenues and expenditures for each of the departments. So I'll send you a link with a page reference.
Well, I agree. I think it's important to maintain these parks, and it very well used, and it's part of I think the tourism and the local community to have these parks. I would just like, for my personal information, a little more detail on how much we actually put into it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I would just make one other request. The 4615, I don't know if that's some way we can get that resolution as well to the committee.
I can send that to the committee and we'll get that added to the packet.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item B, resolution to vacate portion of highway right-of-way, County Highway C in Bergen.
For the two committee members left from the last committee, we had discussed this last time. This is out Highway C out in town of Bergen. This is part of was brought to light when they were doing the broadband expansion. There's some areas out there that the road is actually not in the correct location according to what's platted. So the people that are putting up the tower found an ideal location for one of their towers for the broadband expansion. However, they did not want to go beyond until the right-of-way issue was cleared up. As you can see on the screen, the area in the red is actually what according to the legal description, it says that is where the road is. You can see it's down farther to the south. So the Corp Council looked into this. We drafted up the resolution to vacate this existing right-of-way and just basically say the road is in the wrong location and it's moving down farther to the south in the location it is currently at. But part of this is before we vacate this, we need to have a 45-day waiting period with a public hearing. I'm sure that public hearing is going to have a bigger room than this because there'll be thousands of people at that meeting. So it's basically to clean up some right-of-way issues that were probably from the 50s.
Okay, we have any questions? Okay, hearing none, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the resolution to vacate portion of highway right-of-way for County Highway C inversion for the broadband expansion. Motion by Soibert, do we have a second? Second by Robinson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on, item number 7, educational presentations and committee discussion. Item A is an overview of the committee responsibility relative to the 2018-2022 strategic plan. And there is a document in our packet, which we'll be referencing. Administrator Leonard is going to speak to this. Just make a few comments, particularly for those who are new. You know, we have this strategic plan that's in place, which branches off of our comprehensive plan. There is the version that the 2018 to 22 plan, then there is the 2020 update of that, which we'll see in our next item. The overall plan talks about being the healthiest, safest, and most prosperous county in Wisconsin. In regards to that, there are objectives that are out there for us to be looking at and considering in reference to infrastructure. These would be things like the safe and efficient operation of roadways for economic reasons, for personal reasons, things like broadband, internal IT, our airport, effective land use and natural resource protection. And then we get into our main objective, 1012, which are our PACER rating system and our crash rate, which has been discussed in the previous 2 years. Also, the overall objective of 12.3 being cost-effective applies to all our departments. So I would move that to Administrative Leonard to take it from here.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Dickinson, and you did a great job of teeing that up, so I'll be very brief. I just want to start, I know there are a number of new members, just with a little bit of framing for the discussion, and like I said, Vice Chair Dickinson did a great job. The 2018 to 2022 strategic plan, which there's a link in your packet to that document. The best way to think about that is, as Vice Chair Dickinson referenced, it's a branch off of the comprehensive plan, the 2016 comprehensive plan. It is in the county, it's on the county's website, and I am showing it on the screen right now. It was approved by the board. Again, this is a policy document, one of those main policy documents that, again, was within the purview of the board from 2016. And I will just, again, in a little bit of framing and background, historically, these comprehensive plans, as envisioned by statute, are very land use and zoning centric. I give credit to the county board that worked on this in 2015 and 2016, and our in our conservation planning and zoning department. They broaden that significantly. It's not simply land use and zoning. All of our departments should be able, and they have to be able to see themselves having a role in this plan, as to the Vice Chair's point, pursuing that overall vision, mission of being the healthiest, safest, and most prosperous county in the state of Wisconsin. So all of the objectives laid out in this 2016 plan, and there are 64, fall under that common theme of healthiest, safest, and most prosperous. And within this comprehensive plan, it's really a comprehensive roadmap of how the board wanted us to move in that direction. So not only are there 64 objectives within this comprehensive plan, there are individual strategies that the board identified under each of those objectives to move us in that direction. And again, the frame for this is 20 years. The idea is comprehensive plan should help you move in the direction you want to go over that 20-year span. So that's the framing for, as the Vice Chair referenced, how we start the strategic plan. And in 2018, the board approved the 2018 to 2022 strategic plan. All of you should have that copy, even the new supervisors. I believe we handed that out during orientation. The Vice Chair of the board, and Chair McEwen, is really, through your rules, designated as the champion of that strategic plan. So you'll see, as we move into the strategic plan, and I'm not going to go through this in detail, but it talks about the process of how we moved from 64 goals to try to narrow that focus, because the focus for a strategic plan is what are you going to try to accomplish over the next 5 years, 3 to 5 years. So the board went from that 64 objective plan to saying, hey, these are the 12 things. You identified 12 objectives that you really wanted to move forward in that 5-year span. And the board did that not only by itself, it reached out to, it involved staff to a great extent, subject matter experts in each of those departments in each of those areas of health, safety, and prosperity. But you also had a community leaders stakeholder meeting where they were involved, and that was a very interesting and engaging process for the community. So again, what came out were 12 goals, and you'll see those objectives listed on the screen. It's on page 11 of 28 of the plan. You'll see there are 4 objectives that are under that healthiest umbrella, 3 under safety, and 5 under that most prosperous umbrella. And you'll see that the form that we utilize for the strategic plan captured all of the information that the county board approved in the comprehensive plan. So you'll see the middle of the infographic here is the objective 3.3. So you can go back to the comprehensive plan and you will see objective 3.3 is drawn right out from that plan. The strategies, those 2 across the top of this infographic, those come directly from that comprehensive plan approved by the board in 2016. As part of the 2018 strategic plan effort, there was an evaluation of whether additional strategies should be employed, and those were added where appropriate. But again, strategies come from that comprehensive plan. So you might ask, what is different about the strategic plan from the comprehensive plan? And that's a very good question. The 2 steps forward for the strategic plan, the 2 additions, are really at the bottom of each infographic for each objective. And those are outcome measures and contributing departments. So what do I mean by outcome measures? As you read, for example, here, ensure that every child makes it to adulthood with health, stability, and growth opportunities. Laudable goal, very broad. But if I asked you, how would you know if you're doing that? That's how we arrived, that's how the board arrived at those outcome measures. The question is, how would you know if you're moving the needle? What are some things you'd expect to see? So again, as an example, outcome measure 1, 2, and 3 are those things that the board said we would expect to see these changes, this change in terms of data, if we were doing a better job of ensuring that every child makes it to adulthood with health, stability, and growth. So increased graduation rates, reduction in out-of-home care days, and essentially interrupting the pipeline from our juvenile justice system into our adult criminal justice system. And then the last piece is, okay, whose job is it? Who do we really think that is going to play a significant role in contributing to this goal? And that's this circle on the end. So that, when you look through the strategic plan, just so you have a little bit of background of how to interpret that document and each infographic, that is the layout for each page. So as Vice Chair Dickinson said, we not only, there's not only departments that are identified as lead departments, but one thing that the board did was it sat down and it said, which committees are really charged with each of these specific objectives? And as Vice Chair Dickinson referenced, you can look to this chart, and it's in your packet on page 7, and you can see that the Infrastructure Committee was designated as the primary committee lead for Objective 10.12. It was also identified as the joint committee lead with respect to Objective 8.7, and we'll talk a little bit more about each of those later. Specifically, Supervisor Robinson, I'm sure, will be able to give you some broadband updates relative to 8.7. And I think that demonstrates a really important piece here about these goals. There's a lot of, health, safety, and prosperity are very much intertwined. And you'll see that from the comprehensive plan as well as the strategic plan. That's why the Infrastructure Committee not only has a large role under prosperity, but also under safety. It also has a role under healthiest. You'll see that sound land use decisions for Objective 5.2 and the protection of groundwater, again, a significant role for this committee and certainly for the departments that you have oversight over. So that is really all I wanted to talk about, to again help the new members understand that a lot of the work you will undertake, and when you talk about where do you want to focus over the next 2 years of this term, the idea through the 2018 to 2022 strategic plan was the infrastructure committee would look at this chart and be able to see where it really had its role and its responsibilities. But happy to answer any questions, and you are fortunate you have Vice Chair McEwen as the county board's champion of the strategic plan on the call as well, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
I was going to ask Chair McEwen if he has any additional comments to add before we had any questions or comments.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dickinson. And thank you, Administrator Leonard, for kind of outlining what's been going on the last 4.5 years. What I'd like to stress with not only this committee, I do quarterly meet with the other 5 standing committees to review their committees to see what was implemented by this committee by resolutions or different rule changes that this committee or their committee played part in as far as implementing the strategic plan. What this new board is going to have to consider, this 5-year strategic plan it ends at the end of this year of 2022. So what I'm going to be looking for with all the committees is the current updates with the outcome measures, the strategies that were used by the various committees, and we are going to have to change or revise the strategic plan with the accomplishments that were made. So what I like to do is look at all 12 of the objectives, not just the one objectives that the infrastructure committee is the lead committee for, because there's been examples of resolutions that the infrastructure committee has made that has an impact as far as implementing some of the other objectives. But we will be looking at that, and like I said, all the resolutions and policies that we made should focus on implementing the strategic plan. So thank you. If you have any questions.
Any questions or comments? Supervisor Hardinger.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Administrator Leonard. That was a good part on both you guys to kind of outline this. My question would be, since 2018, when the strategic plan was put in place, you mentioned specific goals and initiatives to reflect that plan so we could have some kind of measured outcome in our progress. So is there a reference that we can take a look at since 2018 that I'm sure you're probably getting to that from your reaction there?
That was perfect. Thank you. You planned that perfectly. I neglected to mention a document, an important document, and that's the 2020 annual update. So to your point, how do you know if you are moving the needle? And staff put together the 2020 annual update to their strategic plan, and again, that's available on the county board website, and I have it up on the screen to do exactly what you just alluded to, which is, help us understand if we're having a measurable impact. And the board directs staff through, as I referenced in the original, your earlier orientation, through its enactment of policy. And plans are a great example of policy. So staff have taken, and we emphasize, to take the strategic plan and drive our annual work plans off of those goals. And we've done that, and in 2020, we presented to the board just what you alluded to. What changes have staff made to the way they work every day, and the programs that we deliver in pursuit of those goals? And I'll just pick one for the infrastructure committee. I think 10.12 is one we'll talk about. And we tried to indicate what changes we've made. And this is just one example, but it's similar across all of the various objectives. So you'll see this page should look very, very familiar. and it's the maintain infrastructure to support economic growth. So what have staff done to try to address, to pursue each of these strategies and improve each of these outcome measures? And here are just a couple of highlights. This isn't everything, but and we'll talk more about this in just a moment when we get to what has happened over the last term. But we began working with this committee to develop a long-term infrastructure plan. As referenced there, you have the largest number of roadway miles in the state of Wisconsin, and funding is, sustainability is a concern. We also implemented, and this is in other areas of this document, as I referenced, the infrastructure committee is a support role relative to some of our healthiest goals. And one of the ways that we've decreased our usage of rock salt, road rock salt, and instead moved to brine to limit the potential for salt infiltration into groundwater. So that's referenced on the second page here of, again, changes we've made relative to our salt in pursuit of the strategic plan goals that have been approved by the board. So you can talk about broadband, and I'm sure John will talk about that. That's an objective 8.7. But this document really tried to capture what have staff done between really 2018 and into 2019 to move this forward. Certainly, as alluded to by Chair McEwen, one of the big questions for the county board is, do we do a new strategic plan because 2022 it ends, and what does that look like? Do you identify new goals, or do you say, hey, we want to take essentially the 2 years that a lot of our operations were substantially impacted and we had to find different ways to do them? Do you extend out the time horizon on that strategic plan? That certainly is an option. But this is a great document, Supervisor Hardinger, to your point. How do you get an idea of what we've done from a staff perspective based on the strategic plan direction from the board? And then each of the committees build their agendas off of the strategic plan. So you'll talk, in just a minute, we're going to go through what has the board, or what has this committee, really focused on over the last term. And one of the big things that I referenced before was a sustainability plan, begin a long-term infrastructure plan you'll see on this document. Well, the fancy term for that is the 2050 Transportation Sustainability Plan, which we're going to talk about. We've done a number of things, again, around brining, but that's the long-winded way of saying this is the document that you want to look at.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. You guys did it in 2020, and obviously a lot of things have happened since then that I'm sure have impacted, they've impacted everybody, but I'm sure they've impacted your operations. Is there any way that we might be able to get a chance to get an update in 2022 before we make that decision on whether or not we're going to extend this package or rebuild it or remodel it?
Great question again, and I'm going to be asking the board for direction on that.
Okay.
It's exactly to your point. A lot of our operations have been impacted. The health department, conservation, planning and zoning, and administration were the three departments that really took the lead on on the strategic plan document, on the annual update document. And those are three departments that really had a lot of things impact them through the pandemic. So if the board wants an update before it makes its decision, I simply need that direction, and we'll build it in the work plan and prioritize it to get it done. As opposed to if the board says that information isn't overly necessary, we know the direction we want to go. It's a resource allocation issue, which I appreciate the question, and that's one of the things we're going to have to talk about with the executive committee.
Yeah, and I
full board.
totally understand that. I guess it's hard to kind of measure where we're at with just one line, I guess, from 2020. And it's tough. You guys are in a tough position just because the last 2 years have been, like you said, very difficult and challenging. So I don't know how far off we are from that progress in 2020 or.
And one other thing I think, and Jim will, I think, reference this when we look at our strategic plan. Our goal, the goals that the board approved, staff, we did our best job to come up with recommendations. Some of them are outcome measures. I think we'll all stand up here and we say, we need to change them. They are not actually the measures that we should have. The best example certainly for this committee, is outcome measure number 2 for objective 10.12. which the idea was reducing the crash rate in Marathon County by 5%. Increasing safety on roadways is certainly very important, and that's one of the strategies to maintain that infrastructure to support economic growth. But we are nowhere near that goal, and I don't think it's actually the right measure of success.
Yeah, and that would have been another question I had is just the input as the administrator here and department heads that would be in charge of these various objectives. Is their input on to how realistic these goals are and what impact they're actually having?
That we did provide that impact
Okay.
or that input, excuse me, in 2018. But again, it was our best guess. I mean, we thought when we sat around this table, we think we can make some meaningful impacts. And this committee pursued a safety study, and it looked at things like rumble strips, center line, edge line rumble strips, looked at areas of high crash rates within our county highway system, and how can we start to make some implementation changes. But I'm not overly confident that automobile crash rate is the measure we want to use as to whether or not we're actually moving the needle.
Supervisor Robinson.
I'd just like to point out that, Chair McEwen indicated that on a quarterly basis he visits with the standing committees to go over the strategic plan. So we are reviewing it and updating it and looking at progress, a few times a year. The question is whether we're capturing it in a report for the public. So we are tracking.
Yeah, and I guess that was my question, is something that I'd just be able to transparently relay and something that we could disseminate.
So I would just kind of wrap the conversation up unless anyone has any further comments or thoughts. And that's just generally, I would encourage everyone to look at the 2016 comprehensive plan, the 2018 strategic plan, and the 2020 annual update, or the update to that, just to kind of frame, again, what the goals are for the board, and specifically, obviously, for this committee. And then just make the comment about the measures. I mean, produce a document as we need to produce a document so that people can see. But, having these discussions, these are things that can be brought up in our committee at any meeting, bringing them up to the chair so that they can be discussed. So, all right. So what I'll do now is move on to item B, which is the review of the 2020 annual update to the strategic plan. I kind of made a misreference that it was an amendment. Actually, it was just reporting on the successes and the things that had been done by the departments. There are a couple notes in there. Objective 6.3, reducing salt usage, where we're using more brine on our roads as opposed to just salt. 7.1, dispatch and records management software, which was taken care of. 8.7, affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. And then 10.12, bridges, roads, discussions about rumble strips, safety, ATV discussion, the airport with our new runway, and then GPS on trucks. So I would just kind of leave that to, is the administrator going to speak to that? I mean, you kind of spoke to it already, but.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, I certainly would be happy to take them. But again, I think Vice Chair referenced a number of those things that, again, staff have taken direction from the board and really tried to find ways to move those initiatives forward. And when you look at that summary sheet, the roles and responsibilities sheet that's in your packet, you will see that kind of cross applicability of the role of each of our various departments to these goals. So relative to salt usage, that's on page 13 of 37 of that annual update document. And you can see that we've had a reduction in salt usage. We were the 8th highest reduction in the state of Wisconsin, over 20% reduction in usage on state highways. And not only is that a good thing for groundwater, but it also saves us a considerable amount of money, almost $250,000. You'll also see that we were very active in applying for grants to make us more able to pursue that work. Jim and his staff applied for grants to get those high capacity brine makers at our various locations. And as you think about it, of course makes sense. If you think about throwing rock salt on a roadway, how much stays on the roadway versus when you wet it and in fact, liquefy it with Brian, it's certainly going to be a much better implementation. But all of that information, I should say the highlights of some of those things are in there. Not everything that Jim and his team have done to move these goals forward is in here, but the highlights. Anything you wanted to add, Jim?
I'm just impressed that you've been listening to my story about throwing salt downs. No, I think some of the things, you hit on most of them, you know, the big things that we need to still look at is the 2050 plan, as we referenced to. The last page of the document is the gap analysis that was performed. And, you know, if you look out in the year 2050, it says we're going to have a shortfall at Highway Department of 9.8 million. Well, you can look at 2050 and say, 2050, a lot of things are going to change. But if you only look 5 years out, we're already looking at a shortfall of 1.3 million. In 8 years, we're looking at $2.1 million already. So that study tells us that we have a lot of work to do and a lot of improvements still need to be made. The other one I want to just quick mention is the bridges in Marathon County. Got a little cheat sheet here 2 minutes ago. In 2020, the number that you can start replacing bridges, every bridge has a sufficiency number on it. And as I mentioned earlier, that we oversee 350 bridges. In 2020, we had 27 bridges with that sufficiency number at 50 or below, so we could start replacing them. 13 were on the county side, 14 were on the municipal side. After this year, we're going to be down to 9 on the county and 8 on the municipal side. And by the fall of 26, we're going to be down to 3 bridges that are left there. Again, some more bridges may start falling in there, you know, with inspections, but I don't foresee more than 1 or 2. So, you know, we've made great grounds there on our bridge program, from going from 27 bridges that are could be in the program down to 3.
Anybody have any questions or comments about the 2020 annual update to the strategic plan? All right. Moving on to item C, review of committee work during the last term and planning for the current term, including but not limited to. Item 1, the 2050 Transportation Sustainability Plan.
Yeah, we I was just mentioning the items in that plan. Part of that plan was also the roadway safety plan that we are currently working on. There was a lot of roadways and segments and different improvements, some of them low cost, such as delineators that we can put up. We're working on those. We are working on a project right now that this summer we're going to improve an intersection on County Trunk Highway Q and J. But one of the major projects is a safety plan identified, and we had started on this one a little before that. There was just a confirmation of it, is the County Trunk Highway K project from the Decatur Drive up into the North County line. That road was identified as one of the most dangerous roads in the county. We've had numerous accidents and fatalities on that road. So that project is going to take place in 2023, the roadway itself. The bridges are actually going to be replaced starting Wednesday. The northern end of the project, there's 2 bridges that's going to start on Wednesday. So that's the first phase. But the roadway itself, there's in tune about $8.6 million of improvement on that road next year, which we're receiving $4.3 million of federal state funding. So we've gotten over about halfway through the funding just through the state and federal program.
Any questions or comments on the Transportation Sustainability Plan? Supervisor Robinson.
Just by way of background, we began work on this 2 terms ago, and it was based upon work that had been done in Washington County. And we share a lot with them relative to priority-based budgeting and efforts to try to get ahead of it. But what we were finding is that our general transportation aids are basically flat in real dollars from where they were 13 years ago. And what happened whenever we ran into a tight budget, we would cut back on our highway funding because it was an easy cut. Well, the state reimburses us on a general transportation aid on a 6-year average. So when you dip in 1 year, you affect yourself over multiple years. And the purpose behind the plan was to develop a little bit more thoughtfulness to how we approached our capital expenditures on highways in order to maximize general transportation aid, as well as address those areas. And one of the things that through North Central Regional, Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, we've done is identify, what projects should you work on in what year. In Washington County, they've got a schedule for seal coating, other types of maintenance to extend the lives of roads. That's what we're working on right now, and Jim and Kevin have been very helpful in that process, but it will be something that we'll be looking at as a committee.
Additional questions, comments? I would add one thing to that in the presentation in March, Kevin had added some comments, and a couple of those had to do with the PACER rating for the roads, and then with the priority of which roads should be done at what time, and so that kind of is incorporated in this plan, which is obviously something that we need to be paying attention to. So, Supervisor Soibert.
I think something else that we really need to pay attention to, because a couple supervisors before the election were promoting getting rid of the wheel tax, and I think we need to support, as a committee right now, to support that wheel tax and put out what that wheel tax does for the county, so that we can be ahead of anything that's done to get rid of that.
I can just add that the wheel tax right now, our paving budget, it funds about half of the paving budget. So right now we'd like to pave in that 30 some miles a year. It depends if we're putting a cap on or full depth. But currently right now we pave 30 some odd miles a year. The life cycle for a road is about 20 years. We have over 600 miles of road. You do simple math, that means we have to do 30 some miles a year to keep our road system the way it is. Again, currently right now the wheel tax funds half of that. So you take away the wheel tax, we'll go from paving roughly about 30 miles a year down to 15.
Supervisor Straub.
I don't believe that anybody was supporting the removal of the wheel tax. I think they were just questioning what are they getting out of it, if I recollect correctly. That's all.
Supervisor Hardinger.
Yeah, just a caveat on that. So half of the wheel tax basically goes towards the roads. Where did the other half go? Sorry?
All of it goes to the paving program. It funds half of our paving program. Our paving program's about $6 million. The $3 million that we generate from the wheel tax all goes in. So the wheel tax funds about half of our paving program.
Okay.
100% goes into that program.
Okay, maybe I misheard that then. Thank you.
And I would just make a comment myself, because I was sitting right next to where Supervisor Robinson was a couple meetings ago, and I kind of brought up, actually, I think it was in the March meeting, that same kind of question about the wheel tax, which is $2.5 to $3 million a year, obviously based upon vehicles. But eliminating the wheel tax doesn't eliminate the need for the money. It just determines how are you. My question behind it is, how do you then come up with that additional money? So it isn't to say we're just going to cut the budget. That wasn't my thought in that conversation. So I'll just add to that. Nope.
And I was just going to kind of echo that same idea. Again, part of the 2050, a big part of the 2050 plan is to help really get our eyes on the future. Like Jim referenced, it's the last page in that plan. It's been my experience, it's easy but not overly effective to focus on, hey, this is our annual budget for this year. But when you, and you need to make tough choices each annual budget, of course. But when you look out and you see, as Supervisor Robinson referenced, you have generally flat transportation aids. But the cost of paving roads is increasing substantially. How are you going to close that gap? And it's not a question of does anyone, do you like the wheel tax, do you not? But certainly we have an opportunity to enhance the transparency of showing this is what the wheel tax brings in, this is why the vehicle registration fee is preferred to borrowing. And we did that in 2018 when we started the vehicle registration fee, but it hasn't alleviated the real question that the vice chair posed. You have a need. The question is, how do you fund the need? Unless the county board says, we do want to change the policy question of what service level, what is the level of roadway maintenance you want on your roadway system. Right now, the board has given clear direction. Pacer rating is 7. It's an objective 10.12. It's your outcome measure that the board has approved. To do that, you need funding to do it. How do you obtain that funding? With limited general transportation aid growth, with limited ability to fund it through operating levy. Your options are very limited in the state of Wisconsin. Essentially, in my understanding, you have 2: vehicle registration fee or borrow. And we can certainly continue to present that, but I think that's a great question to the board: is what is the expectation? What is the desire of the board relative to county highway system roadway maintenance? And I give credit to the committee. They had a pretty robust discussion about that with the 2050 plan. I remember I was the one that at least wanted to pose the question to make sure we were all heading in the right direction. You have 614 miles of road. Do you want our plan to envision moving some of those roadways, allowing them to go to gravel? And it was like, as if I were a heretic. No, we want to maintain all roads. We want to make sure they're paved. So that informed, again, the work that staff did working with North Central Regional Planning to develop that plan. But at the end of the day, you have a service you need to procure for the considerable future, and we know there's going to be a gap. So that's going to be one of the big things we'll talk about for not only this next term, but it's going to be a topic of discussion forever. Sorry, that was very long-winded. Thank you.
Well, thank you. All right, anything additional? All right, moving on then to item number 2, the 28th Avenue corridor.
I'll start the conversation, but I'll let the historian Dave Mack kind of take it through the whole process. It's been a long process. 28th Avenue. It was part of the bypass study around Wausau back in the early 2000s. The project's been kind of sitting on the shelves, but we need to move forward. We do have a meeting set up with the city of Wausau, the Village Main, the other 2 players in this project, of a direction we want to go. We have that meeting set up to sit down and hammer out the decision, hopefully on the 26th. But I'll let Dave kind of go through the history and why we haven't made a lot of progress on up to this point.
Thanks, Jim. I'm not sure I'm ready to be called the historian yet, but I thought that was Gary's job. What's that? Relic, yeah, that too. So yes, as Jim indicated, this has been a long process. Back in 2000, we created a document, and we being the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which I'll maybe explain some other time to the group, but we did a circulation plan for arterials in the metro area, all the way from Mosinee through the village of Maine, and looked at the different road systems that we thought we needed to be improved. This was all being done part of a long-range transportation plan for the metro area that occurred back then, but it also was the beginning of the ideas of how to fix the Highway 51-29 corridor, and ultimately got us to where we are today with brand new interchanges at 29 and 51, and then some of the other interchanges throughout the city of Wausau, town of Red Mountain. But some of the big things that were being talked about with 28th Avenue was we needed to have some other arterial service road basically paralleling Highway 51, going north-south in the community. And this was the logical place to go on the west side. And so we were looking at taking 28th Avenue north and continuing it farther north all the way to Highway K. And then and linking it with Highway U, so you had connections back to Highway 51 as kind of a northern loop in the northwest part of the community. as well as bringing in traffic from the northwest part of the county and the northern parts. People from Merrill are coming down for using that corridor. And so we're looking at making this a bigger roadway. And part of the problem with 28th Avenue, and we're looking at 28th Avenue in this study from like Hill, I think it's West Hill Drive at the base of the hill, all the way up north to Highway K. That roadway is very steep. Most of the people in the community that have been around here long enough call it steepy. And so it needed to be dealt with. The city was looking at doing some things with it. And so we're looking at changing the scope of where that roadway would go. And we looked at and had a design made to change the direction of the roadway up the hill so it would minimize the steepness of it. So as part of that process, we were looking at trying to connect all of these arterials with the freeway system and make sure that we had good arterials that were moving traffic throughout the community. Since I think probably the mid-2000s, we started moving into the work that was being done on the 51 corridor. This particular project kind of fell onto the back burner, both for the county and for the city. And so we've gotten ourselves into a position now, and I think Jim can maybe comment on this, that we have been purchasing property along the corridor that we identified for the last 20 years in order to secure the right-of-way to build a new roadway up the hill on the west side. And so now we're looking at whether or not the county should be a part of that process. What's the city's involvement? Now that we have the Village of Maine established on the north side, what's their involvement with bringing this? Is it necessary? Is it desirable? I mean, these are all the questions now that are coming up because things have happened over the last 20 years that have maybe changed the dynamic in that northwest part of the city. So some of that conversation is what Jim mentioned we're going to have with the city and the village in the next couple of weeks again. So Jim, if you want to add more, you can, but that's the history of the project. I'm not.
And I would just add that the Infrastructure Committee did discuss this, has discussed this at meetings, and is, I would say, I'll look to Supervisor Robinson to kind of give me the head bob if this was, I think generally where the Infrastructure Committee was is in not developing that artery and kind of getting out of that business, and now it's just how do we get out of that? So I do get the head bob on that's accurate. So that's going to be us for the next couple of years, just as Jim has talked about meeting with the City of Wausau and Town of Maine, Village of Maine. Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just building on that, as Vice Chair Dickinson said, this was discussed in the last term. And in fact, the Infrastructure Committee developed kind of a process map for what information and engagement it wanted staff to do with each of the municipalities, the Village of Maine, the City of Wausau, and what that would look like to essentially move away from a corridor map, because that's what ultimately was approved. There was a corridor map that was developed, and you might ask, why does a corridor map matter? It not only drives staff to acquire the properties, and we've done that over almost 20 years now, acquired properties when people were looking to sell, that would have been the route of that new arterial for 28th Avenue. But a corridor map also has an impact on the property owners that own property within that corridor map. And we were approached, the Infrastructure Committee was approached by a property owner wishing to do some development on their property. And when they started working with an architect and a planner, they were told, hey, you own property that's impacted by a corridor map. And as any property owner would ask, what does that mean? And of course, it impacts that if we do, what it means is that if we do have cause to develop that corridor, we pay a different price, essentially. This is an oversimplification, but we pay a different price for the property based on development that's happened in that corridor area. So the question, and I think the Vice Chair laid it out well, is, do we move forward with that corridor map? And the county board identified a decision-making process that said, how do you engage the municipalities to essentially figure out how to move forward with a roadway development? Does it mean we transfer that corridor map and the property to the City of Wausau and the Village of Maine for them to develop a different facility? Do we develop the facility and transfer that roadway to to the city, there's a whole lot of options there because as Dave referenced, you not only have the arterial issue, which I think there was widespread consensus, the need for an arterial is no longer there. There's already an alternative source with Westwood Drive to move that traffic in the event that the highway is impeded in some way. But there are nevertheless safety issues with Big Steepy, as it's affectionately known, that perhaps the city would still like to reroute that roadway long term. So we have been in the reaching out to the village and to the city. We're going to have another meeting. But the process of acquiring or implementing a corridor map is a long one. And by all indications, the process by which you divest yourself of a corridor map is equally long. But we're working our way through it.
Any questions or comments? Nope. All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item 3, ATV, UTV ordinance. And
I can handle that one.
Thank you, Jim.
Jim. We had a ATV, UTV policy that would open up small segments of road for connectivity. With the ever-growing popular UTV, ATV enthusiasts out there, we're getting more and more requests to open up the roads. We had numerous meetings during the past year and a half trying to come up with a new policy on what roads should be open for ATV, UTVs. We brought in experts, we talked to the sheriff's department, and it was ultimately decided that we would open up all the Marathon County roadways that had a traffic volume of less than 1,500 vehicles per day on the road. And if the municipality did not have their roads open, let's say currently right now, I'll use the town of Marathon, for example. The town of Marathon does not have their roads. They don't feel that at this point that the ATV, UTV should be on their town roads. So we said, if you don't think they should be on their town roads, we won't put them on the county roads either. So that was the policy that the committee finally decided on, that roads would be open for, I'll go with roads being closed. Roads would be closed if the traffic volume is over 1,500 cars a day. Your municipality is not open to ATV, UTVs, and we've referenced a few times the language of the MPO. Basically, it's the box around the metropolitan area. If it's in the MPO area, we feel the volume's too high and there's no place for ATV, UTVs in that MPO area. Since that policy was developed, there's more and more townships opening their roads. I know in the annual meetings, a few townships have decided now to open their roads, so we need to redo the maps again and update it. We did pull down some of the road close signs in the town of Rib Falls, open them. The town of Gunther has decided to open their roads once the clubs come up with some funding for the signage. So it's kind of changing that map right now, but it was a long process. But basically, what it is right now is the roads are open in Marathon County except those areas I just pointed out. We do have some conversation going on with the sheriff's department at this point regarding the speed limit. The ordinance did state that the speed limit would be 35 if allowed by law, because up to about a month ago, even though if you drive around a lot of areas, you see the signs that say ATVs 35 miles an hour, those are illegal. You could not have a dual posted speed limit until Senate Bill, I believe 507, was just passed here about a month and a half ago. So all those dual postings out there were illegal. Now I've asked the county, I've been speaking to the DA, Teresa, about what does it mean to be posted. The sheriff's department and I have been in conversation of, does a road, each highway need to be individually posted? Can we just say it's our ordinance says, or can we put a sign up when it comes into Marathon County where we have our signs that said all roads are open unless posted? We could put a 35-mile speed limit sign, and that's adequate. So we're still having some conversations regarding around the postings of the speed limit with the DA's office. She did not have an answer, and she actually sent into the state DOJ for an answer.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any thoughts, any questions, additional information? No? The only thing I was going to add to that is that the hours are expanded as well from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. year-round to avoid the, sunrise sunset issue that was happening before. Before it was a half hour. I think it was a half hour, an hour before sunrise and sunset. So what we did was we just made that a standard time frame. So, all right. Hearing no questions or comments, we'll move on to item number 4, broadband expansion. Supervisor Robinson.
Thank you. You have a handout that we've been sharing at the Eastern and Western Towns Association meetings. In why is this issue before this committee is if you look at our strategic plan, we are one of 2 committees that have been tasked with the lead on this, and the other was the Extension Education and Economic Development Committee to determine what we should do with broadband, and they basically made a determination that we should have it, and the speed limit keeps changing as technology changes, but then this committee had the what or how do we do it, and how do we work with the various providers. So we've been we appointed a broadband task force that reports to this group, and that's now 11 members. It meets the 4th Monday of every month to look at it. So the county began looking at broadband in 2008, and with 2009, Elbert and Associates developed a broadband gap analysis that basically said that what we know is that in urban areas there's good broadband, in rural areas it's pretty sparse. 2015 we had a connectivity task force, and that reaffirmed it. In both cases we decided to rely on the private sector, companies such as Frontier, which we're getting federal funding through the CAF program to expand access, and we just haven't seen the growth. And you have to keep in mind that the state statutes limit the roles of government relative to what they can do, and we can't provide last mile coverage. Well, we can under very narrow provisions that we probably couldn't qualify for in the county, so we are forced to rely and work with internet service providers. In 2018, the board decided to revisit the 2009 report, and we hired Design 9 to develop a plan for the county. They looked and they interviewed local government, business leaders, school districts, and others, and developed a plan that included 35 towers throughout the county with fiber linking it. And we would invest $35+ million into it. We sat down with the internet service providers and said, if we build this system, would you lease the fiber from us in the towers? And the answer was a resounding no. They all wanted to do their own thing, and then the pandemic hit. To go along with the pandemic, we were experiencing throughout the county copper line, phone line failure, particularly in the northern tier of towns, but not unique to them. And Frontier was not expanding new service into many areas. So we were dealt with a public safety issue where people didn't have reliable phone service, and they didn't have adequate or available cellular service. So when the phone lines went down, they couldn't call in to 911. So we began to look at what the role of the county is. And fortunately, as a result of some meetings that we had, Frontier brought in 3 additional technical crews and made some significant enhancements to the lines. We're not having the complaints we once did, but it's still relying on copper, old copper, and we have problems. So we've been working with internet service providers to try to develop a plan for the county. We have partnered with the internet service providers, and again, they need to be the leads in submitting applications in most cases. The Public Service Commission has had numerous rounds of grant applications using either state money or American Rescue Plan dollars. We currently have 3 different proposals or plans where we're partnering with Frontier. If you go to the 3rd page in the handout, you'll see a map with black dots are Frontier. Basically, they're looking at expanding service to about 10,400 homes, basically taking fiber over where they currently have copper and providing it. That's a multi-million-dollar proposal. The blue area is where Serenity Wittenberg Telephone Company is proposing to expand service in your area, in town of Reed, and that the only success we've had to date with the PSE grants has been working with Serenity. We've submitted and partnered with a number of companies before, but not been funded. In the red area is where Bug Tussle is proposing to do a build out to serve approximately 605 new people in your area, in Croninwater and Olton. And we'll know in June where we are with those plans. But what we did, the Broadband Task Force first was dealing with all comers. We would meet with the internet service providers, said, where are you interested in submitting a grant application? And we would support those. And in some cases, we had overlapping grant applications. And what we found in evaluating where there was success is that where there's duplicate service areas and grant proposals, the PSC says they're not unserved or underserved, therefore they don't need our help, and they weren't funding them. So what we tried to do this last round is narrow the scope. We started working with 5 companies, LTD, a firm out of Minnesota, and Charter, which dropped out when we were trying to narrow the scope and avoid that duplication. And then we wound up working with Frontier, Serenity, and Bug Tussle. So we've got those grant applications, and I think going forward, the Broadband Task Force will probably be looking at narrowing the scope, and we may be trying to identify the target areas where we would use our funds. So we're evaluating that, and that will come back through this committee. We've also partnered with companies like Charter. We submitted an application to the National Communications and Information Administration for a grant of approximately $20 million. That grant has been awarded. We didn't get the money. I checked with Senator Baldwin's office. There were 12 states and 1 territory that did receive funding. We were not one of them, even though we haven't heard. And then we also entered into an agreement with Bug Tussle. Bug Tussle is primarily a wireless provider. They're located out of Hilbert. Bug Tussle comes from the Clampetts. That's their hometown, from the Beverly Hillbillies, and it was the name that they've done. But they've really relied on a business plan that calls on expanding wireless service in unserved rural areas, and that's their business model, although they are looking to get more into the fiber to the premise. Last year, we joined with 4 other counties and issued or guaranteed a $70+ million bond issue. About $25 million of that will be invested in Marathon County, where they will be building 16 new towers and laying about 370 miles of fiber. They'll be offering fiber to the premise to the people along that route, and they're looking to expand in the county. The 16 towers will supplement their current coverage in the county. They also work very closely with AT&T, and the value of that is that you'll have not only wireless service, but you'll have expanded cell service. AT&T is part of the FirstNet system for backing up law enforcement, so there's a lot of redundancy. We received out of that 6 fibers in that fiber loop. We have space on all of their towers, and they're making a payment to us based upon a small percentage of the outstanding balance of the money that we've guaranteed. Our risk is pretty low in that, and we're very encouraged by that. They're going to be starting soon. With the build out, they'll be working with the towns on utility permits. They're working with Jerry, or with Jim and his crew on the utility permits in the towns, but we're hopeful that will result in having wireless service available to most residents, and the long-term goal, again, is fiber to the premise. So the issues going forward is how will the county interface or interact with the internet service providers, and how will we target our resources? And one of the things that will help us do that is knowing what internet speeds are. And again, on that last page, currently there are 2 different databases that are used to determine grant awards. And they typically look at under and unserved areas, and underserved may, depending upon what grant you're looking at, either be 25 megabytes per second down and 3 up, or 100. It seems to be moving in the direction of the 100. But we need reliable information. We were encouraging you and all the citizens to take the internet speed test, which is available through the area economic development associations and coordinated through the North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. But go on there and take it a couple times, because speeds vary at different times of the day, and we need that data to refute the information on the maps. Currently, PSE shows that much of the county is covered, and generally, if one person in a census tract is covered, the entire census tract is assumed to be covered, and that census tract can be several thousand or a couple thousand people. So we need this data, so any help we could get in spreading the news and the need to take the test would be wonderful. The final area is we are awaiting word from the Federal Communication Commission relative to the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. They had a reverse auction under which they awarded or notified various internet service providers of the potential to be awarded $9.9 billion of dollars to do build-outs. In Marathon County, Charter Communication and LTD were designated as two of those entities. On a national basis, LTD was $1.3 billion. Charter was $1.2 billion. We have some concerns, I think, relative to LTD's ability to do the build-out and get the financial resources in place. Charter is moving ahead with their plans, but Charter is serving much of the northern part of the county, and generally speaking, LTD is looking at the western part. The problem is if LTD doesn't build out, the fact that they were designated as an entity has precluded them from applying for several funding sources or funding from some of the grant application processes. So we're hoping to get that resolved in the near future. So we're waiting word from the FCC where they are. I know our team that is working on this, the administrator is heavily involved, but Jerry is heavily involved in a lot of the logistics. They're storing cable at Stratford and other sites, but Nora Ali Assam, who came in and brought these in earlier, has been hired in the administrator's office as a special project position. She replaces the work that was done by University Extension. We lost the staff person there, and there were some limitations on what Extension could do relative to grant applications. So Nora Ali Hassam has done a very good job working with us and coordinating efforts and is a contact for the speed process. But again, we'll be looking at what's the role of the county, how will we use ARPA dollars, how will we target those resources.
Thank you for the summation. Anyone have any questions, comments? All right.
I'm actually just going to show, oops, sorry. John mentioned that they have materials stored out at Stratford. I have some pictures I thought I could show you a very quick one. Give me a second here. Oh yeah, I didn't want to. I didn't want to distract them as I was surfing through, getting to the right spot. Is that doable? Everybody see that? I just have a couple quick pictures to show you the amount. So they have about 395 miles of fiber that they're planning putting in. This is not even all the material, but all the blue stuff you see right there is fiber. It's actually black. It's just wrapped in plastic. That's all rolls of each roll is almost 2 miles of fiber. Oh, sorry. Those are all the tops of the vaults, and vaults are in the back of that picture. The orange is the interduct. It's basically 1.25 inch conduit, and there's each roll there is I think 4,000 feet, if I remember correctly. Those are all vaults that are going to be placed, and they're staging this in 3 different places in Stratford. And that green stuff is called microduct. It's duct that goes inside of those orange ones. So, and they're looking to store another 4 or 5 semi-loads of it. Yeah. So I thought you guys might appreciate that to give you a little sense of the scope of what they're installing. Pardon? Those are bug tussles, and they're using a couple of contractors. There's 11 crews that are going to be out installing. They start this week, I think, right? This week or next week?
So we're just giving them space to store it right now?
We are, yeah, and they're going to stage at a couple of other places too. I don't know, Brian, if they're able to work it out at the airport. They were talking to you, I know.
I had a follow-up, yeah.
Okay. I think solid waste, they're going to put some stuff out there.
Okay. Supervisor Robinson.
And again, our relationship with bug tussle is predicated upon that resolution that we adopted last year where we are guaranteeing their bonds. So but we don't have any skin in the game except if they default. We thought it was a very good thing. And again, the value to us is the strands, the access to the tower, and financial.
All right, big project, a lot of work. Appreciate Supervisor Robinson for all the work he's done on the task force for that. Moving on to item D, committee reporting relationships overview. Item 1 is updates from CCIT Director Klein.
Good morning. Lance asked us to keep it to 5 minutes, so I will be pretty brief. In your packet is a project report that we have. And I think at a future meeting, we're going to dig a little deeper into each of the departments. Right, Lance? That's going to be done at a future meeting.
We can do that.
A couple highlights that I can just point out. So that project report shows about 30 projects on it. And just to orient you to it, there's a header at the beginning of it that says Enterprise. And then if you scroll through a couple of pages, you'll see where we start listing North Central Healthcare's projects, the county's projects, and the city's projects. The word enterprise is a term that I use for any of the projects that support most or all of our customers. So there's a number of those projects. And Lance also referred in the earlier to the budget report. I think you talked about that at some point in time. In the budget report that was for the 2022 budget, each of the departments has has highlights, and in their City County IT we listed the projects that we finished in 2021 and then what we're looking forward to in 2022. I'm not going to go through those, but I can at a future meeting. With the strategic plan discussion that Lance talked about, I intersect with that in kind of three places. Number one, on objective 12.3, one of the first bullets is to encourage cooperative service agreements, and we're a poster child for that. The City County IT Commission is a cooperative shared service organization that's owned by the city, the county, and North Central Healthcare. And then in addition to that, we support all of the 11 law enforcement agencies. And the reason we do that is we dispatch for all of the law enforcement, all public safety from one dispatch center that the county owns. Second, we encourage all the law enforcement agencies to share the same records management system. So all but a few of the smaller law enforcement agencies are all on the same records management system, and so there's an advantage to that. And then third, all of the law enforcement agencies that have squad cars on the road, in order for them to get the data from dispatch, they run the same. We share that software and run it on the squad cars. There's 128 squad cars on the road that dispatch can see where they're at and can send information to them at any time. So all of them have that. So that's in 12.1. 12.3 in the strategic plan is cooperative services. And then another bullet in that same area is enhanced 911. And we have done a lot of work in the 911 area. For those that were on the board a few years ago, we spent a lot of money. We completely gutted the dispatch center. We moved dispatch to the basement for several months, gutted it to the studs in the top and the space underneath the raised floor, rewired the whole thing, put in all new furniture, moved it from 8 stations to 12 stations. And then when we brought that system back, we also replaced the 911 call software itself. We went to a product called Zetron and the radio software. And we finished that project last year. It was a huge project for us. There's a whole bunch of pieces of that we'll be continuing to work on this year. Right now, our overflow calls go to Lincoln County. It's our intention to have them go to Langlade. Langlade has the same technology as we do, and we have a fiber run now that we finished in fall of 2021 to go to the Langley Sheriff's Department. So we have a couple of projects that we still have to do. In fact, I was on a conference call yesterday with them. The state is putting in a new system with AT&T. They have a contract with AT&T to put fiber to all of the dispatch centers. So we're going to hop on that. Two other things that we do in the strategic plan in 10.12, technology in the workplace. We'll talk about that at a future meeting, all of the projects that we have going on for the county. The biggest one we have going on right now is enterprise resource planning, which is replacing our finance and health and HR systems. And then the last thing is what John just spent some time talking about, 8.7 in the strategic plan, affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. And I'm not going to add anything to that because John did a great job covering it. Am I at 5?
Sounds good.
you go.
Anyway,
Any questions for me?
or any thoughts? Okay. Thank you for doing that so quickly. Internal infrastructure is what IT is, right? Instead of external infrastructure, you are the internal infrastructure for us. So there you go. All right, moving on to item number 2, Commissioner's Report. Commissioner Griesbach.
We had a lot of my stuff ready, so I'll give my 5 minutes up to somebody else. There's a couple of things I want to report on is every few years we update the Highway Department Policies Procedure Manual. You had a link to that. We do have a few updates we need to do. We've changed our utility fee structure. We need to add in, this committee had decided a few years back, if somebody has a intersection or bringing in extra traffic to an area, that they're going to be responsible to do a traffic impact analysis. So that needs to be added to the manual. The ATV, UTV policy will be added to the manual. So take a look through that. We're going to probably do those updates sometime in June. So if you have any comments, let me know regarding those. And I'm old school. We live in a paper society around here, community. So if anybody wants a paper one, I can print one out. Otherwise, it is online. The other thing I had to report is I talked to Administrator Leonard and County Board Chair Kurt Gibbs regarding conferences. We do have an upcoming road school in Wisconsin Dells, June 6th through the 8th. The policy is that if the chair and vice chair want to go, they can go. If they cannot attend, that the spot would open up. I haven't heard anything back from Chair McEwen yet, but I know Vice Chair Dickinson said he cannot make it, so if anybody is interested, you should see Craig, and if you are interested, I have agendas here.
Okay, thank you for that, Commissioner Griesbach. Item B on that is the 2022 Paving and Construction Program.
Sure, I'll just give you a quick update on where we're at with getting our projects kicked off this year. Our plow trucks are actively being torn apart right now and getting switched over to summer construction. So we have a few of them that are switched over to haul trucks. The other ones are pulling off our underbodies and wings and getting tag axles put back on. So our shop's pretty busy with that. This week we kicked off and did a little bit of mill and overlay in Village of Weston on Camp Phillips Road. There was an existing overlay for about 2 blocks that was in there that was at the end of its life, and we had been patching it, and this spring it fell apart. So with the freeze-thaw cycles, it was a daily event to have a couple trucks out there just filling holes in, and it was at the end of its life. So we added that in and tried to get that before all of our other stuff starts off. So our guys, we milled that on Monday, paved it on Tuesday, and we had the stripers in there Tuesday night, and we opened it up yesterday morning right away. So it was a pretty good project for our guys for kicking off the season. Next week, we start a couple mill and overlay projects. We'll be out on Highway Z between J and Q. We have a 3-mile milling project there. And then the week after that, we're going to go down to Highway N from J out to Forestville Road. That was a thin overlay we put on back in 2008 that was supposed to last about 10 years. So it's at the end of its life now, and we're going to take that off. And both of those are just mill and overlay projects where we'll just take the top layer off and a new surface on those. Bridges, Jim mentioned Highway K. Those are kicking off. Those are contractor projects, so our crews aren't doing those, but that'll impact our traffic. So the north end of Highway K is going to be closed up starting next Wednesday, basically through the fall. Frequently they end up being deer season, gets to be a cutoff when all that is done, but they have 2 bridges to do, and each one takes probably 2 to 3 months, depending on how staging, weather, and all that goes. So pretty much all of the summer, Highway K, that north end will be detoured over to the west end of Highway O. Any quick questions on where we're at with that? We also do on our website, if you guys want to look for updates or if people ask you, we have kind of a link. If you just go, you can go onto our department website under road construction and find information on there. Otherwise, if you type in the county's website and then do a /511, that takes you directly to our road construction and our announcements. That's the address IT created for us to be kind of shorter. We stick it out on barricades and we'll go put it out on roads a week or two beforehand so that the drivers who drive that every day can have a kind of a quick link to go find some information on it.
All right, any questions?
I know it's not county, but Highway 153 east of Spencer, is that on anybody's agenda ever? Or?
Yeah, we've got the state to finally commit to that. This summer, they're going to be replacing all the culverts on that segment, and next year, they're going to be repaving from Stratford to 13.
All right, thank you. And actually, there is a website on that for the state about the updates on 153, so. Yes.
Or Vice Chair Dixon. There's also, the state has a nice interactive GIS map, if any of you guys have ever worked with those. They're read-only, so you can't screw anything up in it, but you can zoom all around. And I think that's new this year, so we could send out a link with the next packet to that if you ever want to look at the state stuff. It usually has the current year and then 2 to 3 years out. It shows they're up to 5 now. They're color-coded by year. You click on them, and it tells you a little information about the project.
Cool, thank you for that. All right, moving on to item 3, updates from the airport director. Brian.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dickinson. I'll be brief. Ownership with the joint airport, or with the airport, is with the Joint Airport Board, so it's a joint venture between Marathon and Portage County. Ownership is calculated based on property value. So Marathon County is the dominant owner of the airport. It's managed through the Joint Airport Board, which Vice Chair Dickinson is a member of. That works very well. But there are some functions certainly of the board that come to the Marathon County Subcommittee. Property and infrastructure is certainly this example, but also all Marathon County employees, with the exception of myself, who's a contract employee, are completely Marathon County employees. So any sort of personnel action goes through that department. Our budget this year for 2022 is $5.3 million. That is artificially somewhat high, and the reason for that is ARPA CARES and CARISA funds. We saw that as a good opportunity with the support of the Joint Airport Board to pay down some long-term term debt. So we took out bonding for the terminal and rental car facility this year, actually approved last month. We will be paying that off. So that'll be paid off in the month of June. And that's why you see that higher. Also, how we've been managing projects the last few years to take good advantage of federal funding, specifically FAA type federal funding. We design the projects, fund the design projects that are AIP eligible in-house. There's an initial investment, which if you look through the budget there, it's the big blue one. 1.7 million. That will be reimbursed next year through airport improvement FAA type funds. That gives us and the FAA a better understanding of what those project costs, what the total project costs will be. They've been appreciative of that. We've been able to capitalize on bringing more federal funding into our community and our airport. So I feel very strong and very proud about that. The rest, between 3 and 4 million, is your general operating income. I like to say we operate a parking facility next to an airport. That is our largest single source of income. One thing that I'm proud about on that is it's completely voluntary. Anybody can drop off, but people choose to park at the airport because of the convenience it offers. Then your typical rents, fees, fuel flowage fees, et cetera, kind of make up the rest of that between $3.5 to $4 million of our annual budget. A CIP, which is near and dear, I know, to this committee. I'll just highlight really the 2 big projects. You probably saw the secondary runway, which is our crosswind or our north-south runway, was completed, reconstructed last year with the nav aids that went along with that. That's in great shape for years into the future. This year, that $1.7 million that I highlighted will be designing our runway shift project. So that's our primary runway will be shifted approximately 500 feet to the east to separate our thresholds. If you look at the overview of the airport, it looks like an L. So our threshold for runway 8 and runway 17 are overlapping. New FAA safety initiatives have required us to decouple those. That's been about a 6-year project to define that scope, and we're in the final phases right now of design. I anticipate bidding that out, bid opening of June 23rd of this year. Construction to start over the winter in some of the wetland areas, with the majority of the construction to happen the summer of 2023. Through that construction, the airport will be open the whole time, although that runway may be shut down. So we'll make sure all passengers are accounted for. I think that's about my 5 minutes. I did want to just briefly note our annual goals, and I think Vice Chair Dickinson can go over that in some details, but the board sets annual goals for the airport annually, and they are purposely short, so they can be attainable. Those goals are retain and attract new employees, engage in business planning that specifically engages around air service, and then improve communications. Other notables are general aviation growth. With the downturn in the economy, we've actually seen tremendous growth in general aviation, specifically corporate, larger general aviation, which fits well in our wheelhouse. If you've driven east past the airport, you see some of that development going up. Operations choosing to relocate to the central Wisconsin airport because of the facilities we operate. So that's great to see. With that, I'll just end with please reach out to me for a tour. Happy to go into this with more detail, but we've got a lot going on, and certainly we'll have a lot going on over the next several years. So feel free to reach out to me or Vice Chair Dickinson for any details.
Could you just add one more thing, and that's the loss of one airline and trying to bring in another airline?
Yes, January of this year, we lost United Airlines. I've been working with, I've been working on 2 approaches on that. One is to bring in another airline, specifically a low-cost carrier, to not only fill some of that demand, but also generate new demand. A low-cost carrier we've never had in our community, and the type of travel that just generates organically, would be something that our community really hasn't seen before. So I think there's a lot of potential in that. That also is really the only area in aviation that's growing at the moment. The legacy carriers, United, Delta, American, even Southwest to some extent, are flat to smaller than what they once were, but the low-cost carriers are growing significantly. They're not immune from the worker shortage, so that makes that conversation a little bit more difficult. The county, both counties actually supported a small community air service development grant. If selected, that could go to help defer some startup costs in the form of revenue guarantees. But then also working with our incumbent carriers, both Delta and American, to meet some of that demand that was left on the table when United left. Thank you.
Thank you. Administrator Leonard has one thing.
Yeah, just real quickly, and Brian and Jerry alluded to this. You'll see different things come to you from the different departments, and as Brian alluded to, one of the underlying reasons for that is they're governed differently. Brian is governed, the airport is governed by that joint airport board via intergovernmental agreement with Marathon and Portage County. Certain things are going to come back here, and Brian alluded to some, because they are Marathon County employees. If you have new employee requests or other issues relative to employment compensation would come to this body. Similarly, CCIT, Intergovernmental Agreement. It's a partnership between City, County, and North Central Healthcare. And Jerry's team provides internal infrastructure. I think that's a great way to look at it for each of those 3 entities. But his employees are not Marathon County employees. He generally follows Marathon County policies, but you're going to see different things come from CCIT to this body. And then lastly, the highway department, that's a traditional quote unquote Marathon County department. So you're going to have other things come in other forms from this committee. The best example, ATV, UTV, you had an ordinance that you ultimately adopted that drives internal policies within our highway department. That drives staff action. It operates differently with the airport board and with CCIT. Those bodies drive the internal operations through policy action there. Just, that was my last point of clarification. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just had one quick question.
go ahead.
Why did United pull out?
Really the worker shortage, brought on by COVID, but they're having difficult times finding captains, crews, et cetera. So they pulled out of not only Seaway, but I want to say it was 16 other markets. I think the announcement with Seaway was about a half a dozen at that time, and that was their reaction to the industry. They had some of our highest load factors. I think they had the highest load factors at the airport. So it wasn't performance, wasn't demand. It was some of the realities of the industry currently.
All right. So moving on to item 8, announcements. A, future meetings and agenda items. So our meetings are the first Thursday of each month at 9 a.m., so that would be June 3rd. If you let Commissioner Griesbach know if you want to go to road school, do that as soon as possible. And if you have any other agenda items, you can always forward those to the committee chair. Does anybody have any announcements or agenda items? Hearing none, I'm going to move on to item 9, and you will appreciate Chair McEwen when he comes back, because I would suggest, or I would hope that his meetings will be less than 2 hours and 2 minutes. But I'd look for a motion to adjourn. I have a motion from Robinson, a second from Hardinger. Any additional? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned.